North Charleston businessman John Singletary ran for mayor in 2019, and now he's coming back in 2023 to run for mayor once again. I speak exclusively with John for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. John Singletary, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure, Quintin.
You're welcome greatly. Obviously, you are a businessman and a resident in North Charleston, and obviously you're a 2019 North Charleston mayoral candidate. Let me ask you, because I spoke with Mayor Summy, that is, earlier this morning for Quintin's Close-Ups, and he says he's not sure if he's going to run for mayor in 2023. Are you?
Absolutely. There's no question. I plan on running in 2023, as I did in 2019 and 2015, and I plan on running again in 2023. I doubt seriously if he's not going to run. He said that the last couple times, and he always runs. So I doubt if he'll let 2023 come without him being in the race.
Why you? Why 2023?
Well, 2023 is a good year. It's a year that for the community, we can get off on a new foot and turn the city around. In 2019, as you know, we're still in court on that situation because we provided proof to the court that we won the election by over 2,000 votes. And so 2023 is a good year.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes, but you said this on Facebook. You said this quote: "I thank all of you who supported my campaign in 2019, and I ask for your full support in 2023. What support, John, do you have now for 2023?
I've got the same support I had in 2019 that won the election, and I'll have even more. I've been out in the community talking to people who really want to see a change in the city, people who are understanding clearly that they are putting the votes on the table. They're just simply not getting counted. And so I've got the same support and more.
Yes, sir. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. As a matter of fact, you said this too. I want to talk to you about the 2019 election and how your participation, meaning the voter, was a game changer in the world of North Charleston politics. How did your participation as a candidate in the 2019 election change the game?
Well, in several ways. First thing is that it pushed the administration to do things that they've never done before for the community. When it comes to the hiring of many of the administration key players, it was a result of us pushing the envelope. When we take a look at the education that we put out in terms of informing the community, it pushed the voting from at least the African American community from 2,000 to 8,000. They quadrupled the number of votes that they put on the table and pushed the envelope such that they are now over 50% of the total vote for the city. They're outvoting all other races combined.
And I want to get to that in just a second, but what is North Charleston politics?
North Charleston's politics right now, unfortunately, is it's a quagmire. It's a situation where the free and fair elections, in terms of the people who are voting, it's not reflected in what is published in terms of the results. It's a situation where we are inundated with gentrification, with high housing, with the highest crime rate in the state, and one of the highest in the entire nation. It is a city where there is not parity when it comes to the equal distribution of resources, and that's why I'm running. I'm running to change that.
Now, talk to me more about the equal distribution. Where exactly should that happen in North Charleston?
It should be happening across the board, from the CDBG funds, the Community Development Block Grant funds, that 99% go to metanoia now. They're not evenly spread within the community. It should happen in the police department, where we are 50% of the population, but we are less than 20% of the actual people hired into the police department. It should happen when it comes to the distribution of contracts. We're approaching $100 million in contracts, and it's only 3% or less of those contracts going to the African American community. That is, it's mind-boggling. It's atrocious. But those are the kinds of issues that we're dealing with now. And of course, you know from hearing in the news that the education system is up for consideration in terms of bringing it under home rule and municipal education system. There are 80 different, in terms of South Carolina, about 80 different school systems. Most of them are county, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We've got Williston Elko, for instance, is a municipal education system, and it can happen because home rule allows that. Now, whether or not that is a good idea for us in North Charleston right now, I say no. I say no, not because it is not a good idea to bring the education system underneath the municipality, but it is a situation of the pot calling the kettle black. Now, when I say that, what I mean is that the mayor has been very hypocritical in that the CCSD for years, with all kinds of studies, made it clear that they were not treating North Charleston African American citizens equally. He sat by, did absolutely nothing, and for his nearly 30-year term was a part of that by a tacit endorsement. As soon as we get an African American that could possibly be permanent in that seat, he now chooses to say, not only we need to pull away, but if he makes it very clear that he wants more for the citizens, particularly African Americans in North Charleston, when his historical track record shows, without question, it's undeniable, that he has had more disparities and more racial discrimination when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to housing, when it comes to crime, when it comes to applying the resources, everything from using city funds only to pay utilities for white churches, and on and on and on. So it would be a good idea, but not under his administration, because we would get much less than we're actually getting out of CCSD now.
Let me stop you there, John. What are the racial equity disparities that is in the Charleston County School District?
Well, there was a study that was done by the College of Charleston, as well as I think one that was earlier done by Clemson. And the disparities are that the equal distribution when it comes to the funds that are received from the federal government and state are not equally apportioned to all students. For North Charleston, for instance, we are in fact getting less, even though we have two of the best schools in the country. They're not in the African American neighborhoods. When we take a look at the recreation that's given to all of the school systems, they're not equally apportioned to those in North Charleston. And he brought some of those points out. But the fact is that he was a part of the making of that. One of the things that he brought out was Danny Jones. To perpetuate Danny Jones actually, if we take a look at the history, Danny Jones was the gentleman who went to Strom Thurmond and got the grant to build the Danny Jones area because they did not want the Little Pelés, who was the black soccer team, to be able to practice with the North Charleston Whites. And if you can remember when, you can't, but at any rate, the Little League World Series, when the African American group went to the Little League World Series, they wanted a place to practice, and Danny Jones, did not want the whites practicing with the blacks. And so he went and got that loan from Strom Thurmond to say that we need to build us a place here in North Charleston where we can exclude blacks. And so that's how we get Danny Jones to start with. And so the truth be told, Danny Jones should be torn down, renamed, and a new facility built.
Now, what should it be renamed as?
Well, I think that we should take a look around and we see some people who've done good in the community, and give them their, flowers while they live. Carlos Dunlap, whose father just passed away, North Charleston grown, and he's done extremely well. And to honor a young man like that while he's living would be great. We've had, of course, many other people who've graduated, gone on, done extremely well. So I think that it would be good to have the community to come in, put up names, and at that point, we take a look at what's going to be in the best interest of the community in terms of renaming.
Okay, and I'm running out of time a little bit, so I'm gonna have to make this very concise here. But let me ask you this: you say that obviously you don't know why he's doing this now or whatnot. But let me ask you: when Dr. Postlewaite was in office, why didn't Mr. Summy did that now and it did it then in your mind?
Well, his action says because um, he has no problem with exuding discriminatory actions, whether it be McGinley or Postlewaite. He didn't choose to do it then. Now that we've got a black head when it comes to the CCSD and Kennery, then what he says is that we need to now pull out. If he needs to pull out now, it would have been more to our advantage to pull out then, because before was when all of the disparities took place. He hasn't even given this young man a chance, an opportunity to do something good or to make it right. He simply says that, hey, based on the past when you weren't there, we need to change it.
Is this race or is this politics?
Um, it's hard to discern which is which. Oftentimes, in this case, I believe that it is both. I believe that it is both because politics controls funding, it controls and holds power. And at the end of the day, like the decision or the comment that was made earlier by Elliot Summy, he said it's all about controlling rates. And that's exactly what it is. When we take a look at the historical actions of this mayor, it's been about race control. Everything from working with DOT to come in and remove 25,000 African Americans, to not using the weed and seed funds properly, to not allowing them to get their fair share of jobs or contracts or community resources or CDBG funds, instilling crime in their neighborhood to hold it there to gain federal funds. All of that is based on, unfortunately, race.
Okay, let me stop you there. Okay, how many of those 25,000 African Americans, where did they actually move to?
Well, they haven't gone yet, but
Okay.
many of them will have to leave. We're talking about affecting 31 neighborhoods. DOT, which has a $2 billion budget, is choosing to spend $1 billion in North Charleston. That's 50% African American. Has more African Americans than any other city. They don't love us at DOT that much. The idea is for them to come and to claim via right of way to need capacity while widening the roads, affecting those 31 African American neighborhoods and displacing them. When you take a look back, the city went in before they came and rezoned all of those neighborhoods, blacks only, so he would then be able to work with them and purchasing that property from them by getting it very cheap, because they rezoned it down to single family from the more expensive types of zoning.
Now, where exactly did they rezone in these 31 neighborhoods?
Ackerby, Union Heights, Murray Hill, um, Liberty Park, Russelldale, Attaway, all of the African American neighborhoods were the ones that were rezoned. And in doing that, they took almost $1 billion in equity out of the African American community. Now, if you notice, what happens is they will allow it to be purchased, go back to the zoning board, rezone it now back to a higher status in terms of commercial or multifamily. In fact, he himself, his family owned a piece of property on Union Heights. It wasn't rezoned, but the property around it was rezoned. That meant that when DOT came in, then they would be able to get more for their property than the other people on Union Heights. That is now being gentrified, and the only way for them to gentrify it is to have the bank, an employer, a contractor, a nonprofit, and the city to work in unison, in concert, in tandem, together in order to make that happen, because the bank is not going to come and allow you to, as a contractor, build a $180,000 house when a neighborhood that you can only get $60,000, unless there has been some strategic plan for them along with the city in order to upgrade the resources and everything else. All he has to do is stop permitting until they protect the people that's on Union Heights or Ackerby, where you see them building these new homes.
Now, how many of those permits have been given out so far?
Don't know. More on Union Heights than I've seen on Ackerby and other areas. In fact, when I frequently drive through, I speak with some of the residents who are disgruntled about it. But it's unfortunate when you have little political muscle, you don't get your fair share. In Union Heights, one of the atrocious things that happened was that they used to have someplace in the neighborhood of 2,500 active eligible voters. After the 2019 election, in which he received only less than 20% of the vote in Union Heights, the SEC came in and removed 2,100 people from Union Heights who were eligible to vote, leaving only 400 people eligible to vote in Union Heights. So we've got to get those people re-registered.
Okay, let me just jump right into it. You said this quote, "The undisputed truth is your efforts, meaning the voters, have been misrepresented in the worst way." What efforts have been allegedly misrepresented?
Very clearly and succinctly, the free and fair election result was fabricated. There was a changing of the final numbers. For instance, I'll run a few things down. If anyone watching this broadcast right now wanted to, they could verify this by going to the Charleston County election results, taking a look at the 2019 election. When you look at that election, go down to the precinct reports. Go to the Patriots precinct. Patriot has 143 registered voters, 140 African American, 1 Caucasian, 2 Hispanic. There were 126 people that voted. All 126 were African Americans. They only counted 5 votes. 4% of the votes were counted, 96% not. And so that's a misrepresentation of their efforts when you're only counting 4% of the African American vote. Now, that's not the only precinct that happened in. Fewer votes than actually cast were counted in every single precinct in the Dorchester County. On top of that, absentee votes. The county only collected 100 absentee applications. However, their precincts, and that's in the whole county, but their precincts where he actually received more than 100 votes in just one precinct. They're claiming they had 440, but yet they can only produce 100 applications.
And I want to get back to that in just a second. But you said this too. In short, your efforts won an election, and due trick and scheme, it was stolen from you. What alleged trick and scheme won the election with the voters' efforts?
Well, the trick and scheme is that he benefited by being, as the incumbent, put in the position, because until the protest is finished, really, it can't be finalized. But the other things that happened that occurred that were tricks and schemes, there are 17,364 people in Dorchester County that were eligible to vote in 2019. They only loaded 3,083 into the system, leaving 14,281 people who could not vote because they were not in the EVRL list. On top of that, let's take Fort Dorchester High School. They're claiming 150 people were eligible to vote, 154 actually voted, but yet they're claiming they had 462 who signed the poll list. Now, they're claiming that they have lost every single signature in the entire county when it comes to the actual signing of the poll list that's required in order to count a vote. In addition to that, they have refused to put all of the precincts in the public notice. The public notice requires you to put every precinct and polling location in the public notice. There are 4 of them that aren't there, which means those votes become illegal. If you take those in the absentee votes, it's over the 1,500 that they claim is a differential. The differential itself is wrong. If you add up, for instance, 9,099 people is a certified number for Charleston County, 3,083 for Dorchester County. The total they're claiming that voted was 12,033. There's 149 different.
Now, how many public notices were there in 2015?
2.
Okay.
Every election requires 2 public notices.
Now, was there an election tabulation system used in 2019?
Yeah, the tabulation system is used. It's ES&S's tabulation system, which is election system software, who actually repurchased this system for $51 million from ES&S. The tabulation and the calculations are simply incorrect. And when I say that, Patriots, for instance, you can't say that 126 people voted, but yet you only counted 5 votes. The tabulation and calculation system should add that up and see that there's an error, and there should be a flag that says there's a problem there. There is a product issue there in terms of the source code being that was written is either written incorrectly, that there are some logical, arithmetic, tabulation, compilation, and syntax errors that are incorrect, or someone went in after the fact and manipulated the equations such that they could not add properly. In either case, the reports that they are spitting out show that they are not simply added correctly. If you add up all of the precincts in Dorchester County, and then you take a look at what the total was for Dorchester County, it's almost 1,000 votes different. That's a compilation error.
Now, what was the source code in Dorchester County? What was the source code in Charleston County?
Should be the same. However, there are the same mistakes that are made in Dorchester and Charleston County. For instance, the report itself is different coming out of Dorchester County, supposedly for the same machines, the same source code or program on the machine. Now, in Gethsemane, they did, in fact, have 100 people, which is the Union Heights area, that they are claiming voted that they cannot produce a signature for because they started on page 3. The law requires them to start on page 1. But in Dorchester County, the issues were not only arithmetic issues that they did not add correctly, but the tabulations were wrong. For instance, in Patriots, there were 2 different certified official results, 2 separate ones for one election. On one of them, they said that there was 1 absentee person that voted. On the other, they said that there were 8 absentee people that voted. That's an 800% difference. When you said on one, there's only 1 person that votes by mail-in absentee, and on the other result that is supposed to be the same, you say there's 4 people who vote by mail and 4 people who walked in. That's an 800% difference. So those are the kinds of tricks and scheme, and I say trick and scheme because even when it's if you made an honest mistake and someone brings it to your attention, then you are inclined to correct it, apologize, and move on, make the adjustment. In this case, the ES&S, SEC, Charleston County, Dorchester County, the city, everyone wants to turn their head as if it does not exist. Now, they acknowledge that it's incorrect. They acknowledge the fact that the Exhibit C document that they submitted was fictitious. But yet, they don't want to acknowledge the fact that that fictitious document that was used by the board to determine their protest decision should have eviscerated the whole election. It should have thrown it out and it should have allowed a new election to take place, or at least to go by the South Carolina Supreme Court prescriptive and compulsory case that is Eastler versus Blackwell, that says that in an election where you have a situation where you have legal votes that are not counted, you add those to the challenge. If you have illegal votes that have been counted, you subtract all of those from the winner. So Dorchester County, with no signatures, we have at least 3,083 votes that are illegal. If you take that from the 5,614 votes that they're claiming that he has, then what happens is he now has 2,000 votes to my 4,000. And so it's clear that, he didn't win the election.
I got it. Let me go back to when you said this is the information was apparently fictitious. When did you learn about it?
I learned about it after the protest. See, they withheld. The law requires them to give me what's called automatic disclosures, as well as I asked for discovery. And in that, they are supposed to give me certain documents. They withheld those documents until after the election. Now, because there was no official results until after that. The official result that they presented was Exhibit C. And of course, we know that that's wrong because they're claiming in some precincts there was over 100% voter participation, as well as the document itself says 3,083 people voted, 3,083 people were eligible to vote, which means that there was 100% voter participation in Dorchester County. That's not true. Now, in the hearing that we just had, Judge Cothran says during the hearing that if in fact I requested source code and other information during the protest that I did not receive and I was entitled to it, then he would send it back, remand it back to the board, the election board that is, for a new hearing. I produced the notice of protest that has the request for those things in it back then, within 24 hours of the election. And so if he honors his word, it will go back for a new protest hearing. If he doesn't, then it'll move on.
Now, how many times were you actually denied a protest?
I was denied due process at the protest. They gave me the protest, but not under the laws of South Carolina, because when you have a protest, the law requires that they give you the automatic discovery. So for them to move forward with that protest without giving me that automatic discovery is it transgresses the law. And so the videos that I submitted to them, the videos, they didn't look at the videos. In fact, they said that they would, but when they went into the executive session, their technology person was copying the videos. They came out with a decision before they even watched the videos. And so in that instance, I was not allowed to put my evidence, because during the protest, they stopped me from playing the videos, said, we'll listen to them in the executive session, which they failed and refused to do. what the only document that they did consider was the Exhibit C, which is the document that they all say is fictitious.
Now, how much did this technician copy your video? How much video did he copy? Allegedly.
None. He was in the process of copying it.
Okay.
When they came out and gave the decision, he stopped because it was no need. They'd already decided. So the videos that they're claiming that they have, that they watched or should have watched, they don't even have them.
How many of those videos did they? Yeah. How many of those videos did they watch?
They didn't watch any of them. During the protest, we were allowed to play a little bit of maybe about 4 of them. I've got 13 total. Now, on those videos, the clerk states very clearly, and this is a clerk who had issues with giving the right ballot. She gave the incorrect ballot, which is solely her responsibility to give the proper ballot, but she gave it during the absentee voting. She did not give the proper ballot, and the day of the election, she did not give the proper ballot. And as a result, she admits that as a result of that, some did not get to vote for the mayor of North Charleston that should have. What's ironic is that the mistake was only made with African American voters, only African American voters. In fact, in Dorchester County, they've also claimed that they've lost some of the machines.
Now, when she admitted this, who were those people that she suggested that should have voted and didn't?
Mr. Smith, an older gentleman who had voted for years in North Charleston, and wanted to vote for me, was not able to. Eric Bowman in Somerville and his wife were 2 of the individuals that they gave the incorrect ballot that they had to then go back and readjust so that they would be able to vote. So these issues are only happening with African American voters. Now, it's ironic that in Dorchester County, earlier I said there were 17,364 voters. 25% of those voters are African American, and they only loaded 16% in the system. There are a total of about 800 votes in Dorchester County that were African American. And if you go back and you add up the precincts in Dorchester County, the number of votes that they did not count is about 800, which at the onset, it gives you the impression that all Black votes in Dorchester County were simply wiped out and they did not count because the amount of discrepancy of votes that they did not count happens to be the same as the number of African Americans that voted in Dorchester County.
And I might be redundant here, but what exactly would be the automatic discovery?
Automatic discovery, according to the law, says that anything that deals with tabulations, calculations, counting to determine the election, I'm entitled to. So when we take a look at the reports that were run and given to me afterwards, the 2 different official final results that were run on the same day, I should have been given those. I should have been given the precinct reports. I should have been given the reports for absentee that they have failed and refused to give. I should have been given the reports for the final result that does not match the precinct reports. I should have been given anything that they used to tabulate. Now, what they did bring was Exhibit C that was constructed by Thomas Lee and submitted by Todd Billman. That is a fictitious document, and they know it's a fictitious document. And that's the only document that they surrendered, a fictitious document that they were claiming, I guess, came out of the reports for the system. But it's actually a spreadsheet that somebody put together and added incorrectly. They did not even use the equations that come in the spreadsheet in order to do the calculations. They went in, manipulated the equations in the cells in order to give a desired result. that just happens to be all wrong.
What should have been those ideal equations?
The equations actually should be, when you tabulate each of the precincts, you do a sum total at the end. And so it'll be a sum total of each of those cells, and that tells you for that precinct how many. And then across vertically, you tabulate. Horizontally, as a checks and balance, you then tabulate across in order that they match up. And when they match up, then you know it's correct. But what they did was they went in and hardwired a number. So it does not matter in terms of the tabulations, because the number that they desired, they put in. Now, when they did that, that's why we asked for discovery. Todd Billman, in his testimony, says very clearly that he ran that report as a result of the discrepancy for provisional ballots for Mr. Smith. Well, that meant that that report was run about 10 o'clock in the morning. The issue there is this, that report has the final results for the whole election. How do you print the final results at 10 o'clock in the morning for the entire election? It's impossible to do that without predetermining the election. And that's why there are two final official results. So that is why I said that the efforts of the public are not shown, because the numbers that were given to the public had nothing to do with the ballots that were cast. That was what they had predetermined based on the analytics for elections. And so the election analyst came up with those numbers because he thought that would closely resemble the amount of people that would vote, and that's how they then started apportioning votes over to him.
So what were the analytics for 2015?
2015 or 19? 2015 was that we had about 53% of the voting population was African American. We had about 50%, about 45% that happened to be Caucasian, the rest were Hispanic and Asian. In 2019, it was very similar. We had over 50% of the voting population still African American. Now, if you notice, back in 2011 and beyond, African Americans were only about 20 to 25% of the voting population. So as a result of educating them, then they actually doubled, then now, since then, quadrupled the number of votes that they are putting on the table. It stands to reason that if they, and so we've got 12,000 people now versus 6,000, 7,000 people voting. So all of the new votes come out of the African American community. It doesn't stand the reason that they would continually put their oppressor in the seat over them if, in fact, now they are not the swing vote, they are the determining factor in terms of who is the mayor.
Now, when was the final report for the election, the entire election, printed in 2015?
It was done about 5 days after the election. We'd already had the protests, and they listed what they call an official final result. Once that official final result came out, I looked at both Charleston and Dorchester County and noticed that the numbers were different in Dorchester, the precinct numbers were different in Dorchester and Charleston County. And when I put a post out on Facebook showing the discrepancy, Dorchester County immediately took theirs down. And it was another week before they got it back up. They just simply at that point duplicated what was in Charleston County. But by that time, I had already downloaded what they put on the system. And that discrepancy shows clearly that you've got two different final official results for the whole election. How do you do that without the possibility of cheating coming up?
And and what other discrepancies, Mr. Singletary, did you discover at Dorchester County?
In Dorchester County, it would take days from the absentee voting, where they only collected 100 votes, but they gave Summy over 300, nearly 340 votes, because they're showing 440, but they can't produce the applications for them. Not only that, they took to Mrs. McQueen and Mrs. Rivers. They actually changed their absentee application and did not sign it. And these are actually poll workers who knew that they signed. A discrepancy was we had about 10 people who, according to the SEC's documentation, voted after the election, voted the week after the election. We had discrepancies when it came to the, of course, the public notice. We had discrepancies when it came to the final results. We had discrepancies when it came to the machines themselves. They're claiming that the Westcott machine, that they've lost that machine, that they can't find it, but they know how many votes were in it, and they just expect me to believe them when they say that they had X amount of votes. But when you take a look at the precinct numbers, they don't even account for some of the absentee votes. In one of the precincts, Coosaw, for instance, I think it was Coosaw 3, he got 102 absentee votes when you only got 100 applications in the whole county. How do you do that? How do you account for that?
Now, how many votes were allegedly inside this Westcott machine?
Well, the thing is, we don't know, because when you add the numbers up, they don't show that they're accounted for in the final tabulation. And this was the precinct where Ed Barfield, Brady Hare, Ron Burnson, Todd Billman, and someone else from the city got together and decided we're going to do this illegal precinct and collect votes. And so they collected these votes on the illegal machine that they're claiming does not exist, well, that they've lost. And they can't say it doesn't exist because they got the serial number from the machine. And so they are claiming that I think they said 400 and something votes, but they can't produce any signatures for those votes. They can't produce a tape for those votes from any machine, but yet they expect us to believe that they collected.
Did you get a copy of those serial numbers from those locations?
Absolutely.
Okay. And how many poll workers in total did you talk to?
I probably filmed and talked to 7 or 8 different poll workers who gave discrepancies, everything from my name not being on the ballot to them saying, well, that the provisional ballots are their fault in terms of them not being able to cast them, and that there's nothing they can do about it, and it's not that big a deal, to the present director, Kramer, for Charleston County, stating that the voters lie all of the time. And so those are the kinds of discrepancies that that we had on the video for them to see.
Now, how many provisional ballots were there at Westcott?
Well, they're saying in Dorchester County that they had 0 provisional ballots, absolutely none. However, the final total shows that there were some provisional ballots in Dorchester County. That's another one of the discrepancies. On the one hand, you're saying 0, you had no provisional ballots whatsoever, when we know for a fact on the video, we have the clerk stating that she was going to allow a person to vote provisional ballot and that it would go in and be counted. But yet, when we get the final total, they say that no, we had no provisional ballots at all. Those are the kind of discrepancies that that we found.
And I hope to get Mr. Kramer and Ron Brenton on to get their side of the story on these allegations. But you said this, quote, the next step was to appeal that decision to the circuit court, and I did. It has taken 2 years to get a hearing before a judge. No less than 6 judges have been recused due to financial interest in the case or some other conflict of interest tied to incumbent Mayor Summy. What was that alleged financial interest?
For instance, let's take Judge Goodstein. Judge Goodstein's husband is Attorney Goodstein, who works at the airport. Mayor Keith Summy, undue influence to get him that job. he works also with Elliott Summit. And the contract for that approaches $2.5 million every time Summit is elected. So how can Judge Goodstein sit on a case, be impartial to the man that controls whether $2.5 million comes into her house every time he's elected? Incidentally, the two people that recommended her to be a judge were Elliott Summit and Keith Summit. And so that's why I asked her to recuse herself. And it wasn't until we got into the Zoom hearing that I brought these issues up. And reluctantly, and against the protest from Attorney Sam Arnold, she recused herself. We go back and look at Judge McCoy, who serves on the BCD call with Mayor Keith Summit. We take a look at just on and on and on and on. There were 7 judges, and because I did the research to find out who recommended them to be a judge, to find out who they serve on boards with, to find out is there a link between them and the mayor. Every single one of them, there was a link, including Judge Roger Young, who at one point in another matter told me he knew no one over in North Charleston. Well, I happen to know. I'm from North Charleston. He went to Stall. He went to school along with Brady here, played on the same baseball team. He worked for North Charleston not only as a judge, but also as a city attorney. That's the position that he gave to his friend, or an instrumental in helping him get, Brady Hare. So when I brought that to his attention, he says that he forgot about all of that. So these are the kinds of things that unless you know the landscape and what's happening, then you're more apt to get in front of a judge who should have been recused, decided not to recuse himself, and you get a dismissal, not understanding that at the time when I did the research, for instance, for Judge Roger Young, he had never, ever, in any case, ruled against North Charleston. So why would I think that my case would be any different? Now, I asked him to recuse himself, but he said that he voluntarily did. But I asked all of these judges to, out of a courtesy, to please recuse themselves.
How many of those judges actually recused themselves?
Every one of them that I asked, and here's why. When I ask a judge to recuse himself, I submit to them also the documentation to prove why they should be recused. And I will normally give it to them, asking them out of a courtesy to recuse themselves. And if they don't, then I submit it into the court as a motion for them to be recused, along with the documentation to prove why I'm asking them that. And so every one of them that I asked to recuse himself did.
Now, how many documents did you actually show these particular judges?
For all of them, if he recommended them to be a judge, and oftentimes he'll get judges, they judge shop and get the judge that they want. And oftentimes I would submit the questionnaire. There's a questionnaire when a judge becomes a judge that they must fill out, and on that it tells who their personal recommendation is. And so if it's Keith Summit, I put in, several of them were, I put that. If they've had any contracts with the city over the years, if they work for the city, if their family member is connected with the city, I put documents of minutes from meetings like the BCD called meeting. If there's been any type of connection in the past that I can find, I submit those documents along with it. And we have to do this kind of stuff to protect ourselves.
Yeah, no worries. Unfortunately, this turned into a 1-hour interview, which I was hoping not would happen.
We never have enough time, Quintin.
But let me ask you this: where should the weed and seed funds go to, as far as in North Charleston, and where should the CBDG funds go to?
Well, the CDBG funds, you can take a look at Charleston County, because North Charleston and Charleston County apply for them together. There's a CAPERS report, a Consolidated Annual Performance evaluation report, and that'll show you about the money, how it's spent, and all that kind of stuff. But it should be going out in the community. The CDBG funds, what's going on is Metanoia is getting those funds with Bill Stanfield, and they're getting about 98% of the funds. Recently, some went to Davis and Floyd for sidewalks, but they're taking the funds that should, the CDBG funds come about because when there was redlining, and I grew up on a redlining street that still has part of the wall on it. What happened is the government said we got to have a fair housing administration in order to combat what we did that was discriminatory. So we're going to add also CDBG funds, these community development block grant funds, to help out with getting housing for the people who were discriminated against. Those were African Americans. And so those funds are for that community, but he's giving those funds to Metanoia. Metanoia in turn goes out and purchases property in Metanoia's name. Then they double dip and take federal funds from the vouchers in order to put people in them. So not only did they purchase the house for themselves with money that should have gone to the Black community, they're now getting federal funds for rent in there while they increase the value of that property and equity for themselves. So when they sell it later, you're talking about millions. But it doesn't stop there, because not only are they double dipping, but they are negatively affecting the community because they're not giving us our fair share of those funds.
Let me ask you this. You said that Metanoia allegedly gave money to Davis and Floyd for sidewalks. Where were the sidewalks supposed to be placed?
Well, the mayor gave the money to Davis and Floyd.
No,
There was a part of the CDBG funds allowed them to do some sidewalks. And so they decided to take those funds and allow Davis and Floyd to have the contract, which is an engineering firm, not a contractor for sidewalks. And so those funds could have easily have gone into the African American community. We have a lot of people who can do sidewalks. The Weed and Seed funds, that was blood money that the city extracted from the Department of Justice as a result of Echo Avenue being one of the worst, the third worst in the nation at that time in terms of most likely to die, homicides. They took those funds and he spread those funds all over the city, but not in Union Heights. Because, see, if he corrected that problem, it would stop the federal funds. So we've got to keep this problem going on to continually draw the funds down. And then he took the funds and diverted them other places like Barnes Avenue LLC, Seacoast Church, other places that took the funds away from the target area, which was Union Heights. Now he goes back to gentrify Union Heights.
Now, with those in those African American communities, what is the exact property value and equity right now?
For instance, look at Union Heights. Probably value of the property $50,000, $60,000 for the units, and the new homes coming in $180,000, $200,000.
Right.
What bank in the world would allow you and finance a $200,000 house in a neighborhood where you can only get $60,000, unless there's an underlying scheme and efforts to redo the infrastructure, put more resources in, and all those kinds of things. What contractor would build in a neighborhood a $200,000 house when it can only be sold for $60,000? So that's about the value of the property. At some point, what's going to happen is they will put enough in there so that they overrun the neighborhood. They come up with the homeowners association, begin to have court enforcement come in and find the residents that are there. The taxes will jack, and they will simply run them out through that gentrification process. The city allows the permits for that to be done. Without that, they could not build.
Now, yeah, and speaking of building, where exactly do they want to redo infrastructure in these areas that you just mentioned?
Well, an article recently, I think, came out in the paper, and they were talking about now that we've got people moving in, we need sidewalks. Why did they not need sidewalks all the other years? That's just like saying, CCSD did all those other years while they were being discriminating, that it didn't need to be corrected. But now it needs to be corrected. In Union Heights, all those other years, our children played in the street and it was fine with cars coming up and down. Now it's a safety issue that we have non-African Americans moving in, and so now they need to put sidewalks. Now they need to come in. I took a picture in 2015 of water during the rain washing down the street and literally lifted a grate's almost 300 pounds, up out of the street and had it floating on the rushing water. Those are the kinds of things that should have been done a long time ago. And again, the disparity in how the present administration is spending the resources amongst the people in the community, it shows that his history, his track record is that the African American community is not going to get fundamental fairness as long as he is the mayor of the city.
Now, I hope to get the mayor back on Quintin's close-ups to get his side of the story on this particular issue as well. But do you believe that since gentrification is slowly happening in some people's minds on the south end of North Charleston, that they will finally get a grocery store?
The grocery store has been, in Donald Trump's words, the big lie that we have heard over and over and over. Like it's a broken record. The present mayor, Keith Summey, has promised a grocery store even if the city had to build it. He not only has denied companies who have submitted plans to build a grocery store, denying those permits, but $1 million was given to offset the building and running of a grocery store. They simply took the money and did other things. The HUD 101 form from the Navy base shows that $1 million was given to be put in an FDIC insured institution. Now, they later came back and said, well, $500,000 was given in order to be used as a credit. That's not what was on the form. That's not the numbers that were on the form. The numbers clearly said $1 million. Here it is, put it into an FDIC insured institution. Whoever builds a grocery store gets to have that to offset their costs. And he simply didn't do it. And so in my opinion, he has no plans on putting a grocery store there for the African American community, not until he gentrifies.
Now, what was that FDIC institution?
They could choose whichever one that they wanted to. The fact is, it never made it to any. Never made it to any. So we have no idea where the money is. In fact, one of the council people who initially took issue with what I said that, well, I don't know if that's the truth. And after they researched it, they came back and we had another conversation. And they said, I find that what you said was true. The money was given and to be put in an FDIC institution based on that HUD 101 form. And so we can't tell you what the status of it is.
To be continued. John Singletary, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Always my pleasure, Quintin.
Thank you.